We've got an update now to a powerful story about a Valley man and the hero father he never got to meet. Michael Walling and his wife were able to see the crash site where his father's remains were found in Vietnam. He sat down with our very own Mark Curtis to share how they were able to find peace and healing.
Honestly, it was always kind of a burden that I kind of shouldered, like, a sense of guilt.
For years, that guilt was crippling for Mike Walling, the son that Charles would never get to meet. On August 8, 1966, on that volunteer mission, on his final flight of the day, Charles Walling was shot down near Saigon. Dad, to you.
The visit to Cameron, which was incredibly important to us because that's where he was stationed, that's where he lived, and he was on the beach, and it was beautiful. My father got to spend his last days, hours, minutes in this amazing beach location before he hopped in his plane.
Walling was considered missing in action and presumed dead. But there was always that lingering question. Could he still be alive out there? It was a question that remained unanswered until December of 2011, when the Wallings got a call that remains had been found. There were bone fragments and a belt buckle, all positively identified. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Milton Walling was finally coming home.
And Mark now joins me for the backstory. Just watching Mark and the way he is talking about what happened and how he's gripping his wife's hand. Obviously so emotional. What struck you about his story?
Tram, I actually thought about you when I was doing this story, because what struck me most was how war doesn't only impact the victims during the fighting, it impacts generations to follow. And so here's a man who grew up without a father, which is tough enough.
Right.
But then to be saddled with this guilt because his father wanted to fly this last mission, this 100th mission, in order to get home for his birth.
Yeah.
And so he lives his life thinking, I'm responsible for this somehow.
That was his fault.
And there was never any closure. So then they find the father's remains. And by the way, this military outfit that looks for DNA for these missing in action soldiers, it's incredible. So he gets a call, father's remains have been found. They bring his father's remains home. We fly to Arlington Cemetery a few years ago where he's buried with honors. And we thought that would be the end of the story.
Right.
But then he gets a call last December. And the call is, would you want to go to Vietnam to see the crash site? He's never been there. To see where his father took off from. He was talking about Cam Ranh Bay, this beautiful, almost Hawaii-looking place.
Yeah.
But this trip was part of a program called the Two Sides Project. And what the Two Sides Project does is it brings generations together from opposing sides of the battlefield. So Mike Walling and his wife Dina, along with other couples from Arizona whose fathers had also been killed in action, go and meet the offspring of North Vietnamese children who are now adults, whose fathers and uncles and brothers were killed by American soldiers.
Wow.
And it's through that meeting that he finally had the closure and acceptance and understanding of there are just so many innocent people tied up in a war for generations to come.
Caught in the middle.
Caught in the middle.
And it's like there's nothing that they could have done, right? They were just there. And then because of the aftermath and the instances that had occurred, they're stuck. And then they have to try to move their life forward.
And it's a heavy burden for anyone who has been in that position.
Yeah.
Tram, it is such a moving story, and I don't say that because it's on our air, but because it is. It's this story of people coming together, looking each other in the face, and I almost wish that we could do that in more instances.
Right.
Because sometimes when you sit down and you talk instead of fight,
Exactly.
things can happen for the positive, for the better.
Oh, how powerful. I cannot wait to see your story. That's coming up tonight at 6.
Tonight at 6.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much.